all Paul friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe on call. And tonight, well, it looks like it's going to be me. Barry's not here. Gary's not here. For all I know, Gary might be showing up a little later. Barry definitely won't be here, which is fine. You get me all to yourselves. But anyhow, the topic for this evening, and this might be actually revisited again if Gary, if he shows up, or if he doesn't come until next week, and then well, not next week. Reminder, we're not going to have a broadcast next week. So April 1st, there's not going to be no broadcast. David in the chat room just mentioned that, oh, you know what? April 1st is April, next Thursday is April 1st. So it's going to be an April Fool's joke, right? It's like, no, it's not an April Fool's joke. I'm going to be on vacation. So I'm not sure that's going to be still weird. I'm going to be having vacation during Holy Week, which is actually okay. I'll be back on Friday, and I'll be able to make it to Friday Mass. I'm hoping to go to Palm Sunday Mass on Palm Sunday, and on at a nearby church. I need to do tomorrow is look up to see what's the local churches, because I do attend church in person. Actually, I'm an officer. I'm for those of you who actually have this in their churches. I'm one of the people that actually tells you, okay, just make sure you're seated 6 feet apart, and you have your masks on and all that kind of thing. So I help people get seated. So that's what I do. I volunteered way back when they first started opening churches, and they needed someone needed people to volunteer to help out. So I'm like, to help out that way. But anyway, just a reminder that I won't be having a podcast next week. Now, when it comes to the topic for this evening, actually is a continuation of last week's episode. Last week's episode was a beginning part of, we're talking about the Juggernaut ships and how they're so powerful. I mean, if you look at it, it's freaking insane. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, I'm just gonna. I'll let you guys see this in just a moment. Okay, that should be good. And let me just switch the view so that you can actually see the chart here. Now, as you can see here, okay, when it comes to the Juggernaughts, we got the Dreadnought, we've got the heavy cruiser, we've got the light cruiser, we've got the battleship, which is weird that they put that below, whatever, because normally they put it by size class. Battleship at the top, DNM, missile Dreadnought, a destroyer, and a frigate. If you notice, okay, the frigate BPB 80, that's a little big for a frigate, but not that far off. Dreadnought's 105, a little high, but not bad. CA is 340. That's like at least twice as large as most heavy cruisers. Dreadnought, it's like, again, twice as big. It's 2 times as big as a normal destroyer, at least when it comes to the BP. If you think about it in BPV costs. Not costs, but as I mentioned before, when it comes to BPV, the problem I've always had with BPV is that BPV does not tell you the whole story about the ship. And as is with the scouts, they try to at least tweak it a bit. In that, for a scout, if you have it as part of a fleet, they say, no. You can't use the BPV. There's a separate one, which is the EPV, the economic cost. So they figured, the economic cost is because normally why it's a higher economic cost is because of the special sensors. At least that's my understanding, because all the electronics and so forth. So economically, it costs more, but in a one-on-one battle, it's worth less because special sensors. If you're doing a duel scenario, scouts are not the thing you want because they have less weapons. But if you're in a fleet battle, you have more EW. So that has a great benefit. If you actually have a scout, so special sensors can radiate EW. It really helps out a tremendous amount. Now, again, which this means BPV doesn't tell the whole story. It really should have more of I think it should have more of split, of values, offensive potential and defensive potential, which basically I think is what they do with F&E. But they still have a certain economic cost. But currently, because of basically the history of SFB, BPV is equal to the EPV. In other words, which is the economic value. So in that case, the economic value is equal to the base point value. In that case, and that's which is not really the case. I said the F&E does it better with where it splits offensive and defensive potential, which I think is a better estimate of an overall ship. I think it's still just values, and you can't really gauge values, especially when it comes to interaction of weapons. Because try to compare a fleet of Federation versus Klingon and Hydran versus Lyran. BPV, the BPV, I'm not sure they quite match when it comes to, because the Hellboard, one of the things that the Lyran has on its side is the ESG. The ESG can actually absorb the Hellbore, and so you don't have to have the Hellbore has the possibility of not hitting the shield, and that ESG provides an extra protection, extra shield protection against that Hellbore. And so in that case, for that matchup, it's possible the Lyran can consider doing a little better or worse, because obviously the big issue with ESGs is that Hellbore ESG interaction is that the Hellbore automatically hits. There's no die roll involved. So let's kind of offset. Now, let's get back to this. So to make one of the things that Gary and I mentioned after lights were turned, not the lights were turned out, but after the show had ended, lights had not turned out because I was still doing things. But after the show, I mentioned that one thing that really he wanted to get to discussion of, which was player campaigns, Juggernauts with player campaigns. Some of the things that he was mentioning was the obvious one, which is not the economics, because I think most of us would agree that the BPV is about right. It might not quite be that much, but most part of the thing, I think we agree, unless the people play test it and actually find the tricks and the tactics and strategies against it, and that would decrease the actual the BPV, the base point value when it comes to battle, not when it comes to economics necessarily. Um, but obviously things would be a little more expensive. The problem is this column here. Explosion strength. That means that if one of these suckers blows up, it's a small sun. In the case of, let's say, a battleship, it's like 750 points explosion. You can wipe out a freaking fleet if you have a battleship and it goes boom. Now, obviously, if you're playing as a player campaign, that costs you 768 BPV. I'm not sure how hard it would be for the economics perspective, but it's not just economics, of course, with campaigns. Is that depending upon the campaigns, the campaign designer's handbook, you can look for some ideas there. And because in theory, for those larger ones, you could say, well, it's not like what they call the Mythical Man Month. The Mythical Man Month, the problem, what they call the Mythical Man Month, the issue with it is, the whole idea is that people are interchangeable. That to fix a problem with a project being behind is to put more people on it. That's the wrong approach, because of, if you ever read the Mythical Math Month, actually I've never read it, but I've heard enough about the principles of what it's pointing out is a fallacy. And the fallacy is that you can just throw people at it and it will be done faster. No, the problem is you add people, you add complexity. Would adding one or two people, would that actually help a situation? Possibly, because of the amount of overhead for an additional one or two people might not be that great if you already have a group of 10, and they might be able to pick up the slack when for other things that Now, of course, if you're thinking about building a pyramid or building an apartment building or a skyscraper, yeah, you can add a few more people and still be good. Now, for certain things, it's like development. You couldn't just throw two new people on a project they do not know. They don't know the code base and so forth. That doesn't work. Just because of they might be able, if you allow them some time to get up to speed in that code base, you'll understand the paradigms, understand the frameworks that they're using, how they're using them, because each project might use a framework a different way, and also understand the code. But anyway, so getting back to what I was mentioning about the Mythical Man Month, is that you could actually say, okay, that a battleship could take you, maybe let's say 4 turns or years, however you want to put it, to build up a battleship, and it would cost if you wanted to also simulate this, you got to simulate the number of docking stations that you actually could build these ships at, these shipyards. Sorry, shipyards is what is the term I really should be using. And in the shipyards, they only can have so many slips, and the slips can only build ships of a certain size. So, that's the possibility, and you might not go and actually blow up your battleship in the middle of your opponent's fleet. Now, as pointed out by Gary, one of those things that would have to be done when it comes to all this is that the explosive strengths would have to be dialed back, really, really dialed back. About because even let's say a frigate with an explosive strength of 75 points, it still can cause a lot of damage. Now, I'm assuming that if the opponent for the person who's playing the Juggernaut in a player campaign, if they see a frigate coming barreling in at them, they're going to blow that sucker up before it gets close to the fleet. So it won't be able to take advantage of the explosive strength, though in a way it's already done so by distracting them, forcing them to focus their firepower on that one ship. Now, that'll happen for any of them, really. And to be honest, in combat and fleet battles, a lot of times, what do? You try to decrease the amount of firepower that is firing at you. How do you do that? What you do one way of doing that is to actually blow up the smaller ships. Hate to tell you guys, you're the smallest ship. You're the smallest ship we can actually blow up by focusing our firepower on that one ship, so you die. Which is basically cannon. It comes down to cannon fodder. That's what it is. You know. So that's one of those things. Obviously, some of the things that currently are not on here, because this is a very small master ship chart. There's plenty of ships that are completely missing. Now, as was pointed out by Gary last week, one of the things that the ships, I have to read the story, and so I think that's kind of important for me to read the story. And that is that these ships, even though like the Alpha and the Beta, they're currently computer-controlled ships. My understanding of the story is that they originally, I know, as I pointed out last week, that the ships weren't originally designed to be computer-controlled ships, i.e. completely run by computers. There actually was a I'm trying to come up with a term that's actually going to be right, because I was going to say human, but that's no live living organism. Okay, that living organisms that were the crew. So there was a crew on the ship, and Gary was pointing out that one of the stories is that I think it was the Alpha. I think it might have been the Alpha. But one of the ships crossed the great void between galaxies. But in going from one galaxy to another, the crew died. Now, one of the suppositions that I was made upon hearing this is that they might have had hibernation. They hibernate because of those are pretty long distances between galaxies. So, and now in the Starfleet universe, the one thing that I do not know is about extragalactic travel, and that's one of those things that I really wanted to understand. But is that I love the idea in Starfleet battles, the whole idea of extragalactic travel, because with extragalactic travel, that means you can meet up with other empires which are completely foreign. The technology is completely foreign from the one that you are coming, either you basically you came from, whether it was your home galaxy or some other galaxy. So I find that eternally fascinating. But the one thing that I don't know when it comes to the Starfleet universe is that what is the supposition when it comes to between the galaxies? Because I'm not an astronomer, and I'm sure I'll hear something about this. But my assumption is that there's a lot of emptiness, i.e., there's no solar systems or planets or stars that are not part of a galaxy. So if that if that is truly the case, that means that there's the only thing you might find out there is other empires or organisms. One that pops into my head, of course, is dragons or other really weird space monsters. That actually live between the galaxies. Actually, that'd be a good question. I'm sort of thinking about is the Jindarians. Because the thing is with the Jindarians are a very ancient race, and they don't know that much about them. But what they know, they've been living in space. They've been living in asteroids for millennia. So given that, it'd be interesting to find out if are they extragalactic. At the moment, I don't see that as a possibility. My guess is that they're just very old, and they were generations of living in space help them to grow through natural selection, just change the way they were. Heck, they might have been not medically altered, eugenics. That's a eugenics project within their own empire. Did they now live in the asteroids because of their own home planet got destroyed somehow? And they figured the best way to survive was, there was asteroids in their solar system. They figured, hey, if we can hold out some of these asteroids, we can live there. And since there are so many millions of planets, beings on the planet, they just kept on taking all the asteroids around their solar system, and then from their solar system they sped out from that solar system. And so, and the whole idea of clans and so forth, that makes sense, especially in nomadic cultures. Now, I'm not sure we mentioned it last week on the call or not. I forget. Actually, Iggy, Rogue Stars, I don't know. See, this is where my lack of astronomy fails me tremendously. It is possible there might be rogue stars that are created outside of a galaxy, or they get left behind as a galaxy moves. Don't know. And I'm not even sure even astronomers can answer that question at the moment, because of, actually, in theory, we should be able to, because in theory we should be able to, because we should be able to figure out how far each galaxy is from each place, and then in a certain direction how far that star is away from us. because I know astronomers can calculate that kind of information from the light that's coming from the star itself. Well, actually, uh, yeah, I think that's well. Actually, no, it was in the blue. I think it was blue or red. That has a blue shift or a red shift. Tells us if it's going away or coming towards us. I don't know how. I'm assuming there's a way of calculating how far a star is from us. I Iggy, I can believe that. Iggy saying that when galaxies merge, some stars can be ejected from the merged galaxy, and I believe, and I will believe Iggy. Is I'll believe Iggy. No, because he might be a heck of a lot more knowledgeable than I am, and when it comes to astronomy. But anyhow, that's why I always thought the extragalactic idea of extragalactic travel was very interesting. Get back to this, and that is with the Juggernaughts. You know, they've got a good selection here. You've got all the ship sizes that are required to have a normal fleet. Now, but there's, of course, all of the little itty bitty things. The question is then, the thing is, as a player campaign, a player empire, player campaign empire, in that case, you have to assume that these are all crewed. Actually, they're not just roaming computers. Though in theory they could, but the reason why I say you have to have an active crew on these ships is the whole idea of creating another ship. Because so far from what I know of the Juggernauts, there's nothing that indicates that there is a directive within the Juggernauts themselves, which says, go forth and multiply kind of thing. Create another ship. So, which would lead me to believe that you need a sentient being. I know the whole idea that you can actually have a purely electronic sentient being. Are the direct sentient, meaning I forget if Drex are the robots. I know that I think the Drex are actually the robot empire itself, not the people that basically they're protecting and so forth and growing a galaxy for. Now, obviously, the certain things are missing from this chart. So some of the simple ones. Okay, directs to the computers. Okay. But obviously, certain things are missing from here. Bases. You need to have battle stations, regular bases, star bases, things like that for defensive things. Obviously, I see no scouts now. The one thing that I'm going to point out is that, if I recall correctly, the Omegas, I don't think any of the Omegas actually have scouts. So, if the Omega empires don't have scouts, then it's possible to have an empire without a scout. Because even if they do have scouts, there is the possibility that a empire can live without scouts. Yeah, Iggy, Frax are simulated race. Drex are not. Drex are an Omega Empire, is what they are. So, um, and we'd have to figure those out. Obviously, for freighters and things like that, you can use the general units for that. The question would be, in my mind, that would the Juggernaut um would would their freighters and so forth look the same, or would they basically be larger and basically would they be supersized, and that's the only kind of freighters they had. They wouldn't have the smaller freighters. Don't know, might be. When it comes to I'm assuming it probably would, that the Juggernaut as a player empire would have all the trappings of the Noah Empire. Including FRDs, fleet repair docks, things like that. Now, again, lends to the question when it comes to doing the things like that is that would you have to do a Juggernaut specific version of those needed ships, or could you just use the generic units? I'm assuming that for the most part, as a stopgap, as a first step, you can just say, okay, just use the normal ships. But if you think about it, I'm willing to bet that the Juggernaut ships, because I don't have it up. Okay, I logged into Facebook earlier this evening, and Jessica Orsini, I think I got that right. It's definitely Jessica is the person's first name. I think I'm pretty sure it's Orsini is what I'm thinking of. But they did a quick drawing to show how big a Juggernaut is versus a Fed CA. And they said they got this from the picture and depictions of the Alpha Juggernaut and the story there in the pictures. Okay, actually, do we have? Yeah, like this one. Now, if you go just completely from this, I don't think this picture really depicts it properly. It's possible in the story, I've not checked the story out. It's possible the story gives them more detail, because the reason why I say that is because, like anything when it comes to pictures, is that the whole idea is that something that is larger is closer, and something that is smaller is farther away. But when is that, not the case? When is it actually that this thing's just so huge compared to the D7 and the CA that they're close by, Love some of these drawings. I think again, see how this one here, in this one I think this might be a better indication of closeness, though. Again, we don't know how far away the Fed CA is versus the actual Juggernaut itself. But these are neat little depictions. And as I pointed out last week, this is just one of those. It's been a while since I've seen ships drawn that way. Okay, just double checking for him. Um, the now let's say that we kept the BPV the same, decreased the explosion strength, so that it doesn't. The whole idea of a suicide ship does not become appealing. Given if we did that, could there be actually played in a campaign? Because of with the Juggernauts actually go out in force. Would they actually have a fleet? Because the reason why I asked that is this. And that's the BPV costs here, because basically, um, a light cruiser, which according to this table is worth 235 BPV. That's equivalent to a dreadnought. Now, obviously, most fleets, if you're sending out a fleet, you're sending out at least like 500 BPV, possibly up to 1,000. Now, obviously, you want a large fleet, you can go higher than that. But I'm thinking about it is a reasonable fleet that you send out for exploration and fighting it out with whoever you run into. So in the case of Juggernauts, because the BPVs are so much more, I can't imagine them actually going out in force, having lots of ships and a large fleet. I just can't imagine Juggernauts doing that because, obviously they could roll people over. That's always the issue. Because that's one of the things that when we talked about the super stack, where the whole idea is that you have this big, large. We have this issue in Starfleet Warlord at the moment, and I'm not sure if it's an issue. It's just the way that it is, and that is there is no limitation when it comes to stacking in Starfleet Warlord. That would actually be interesting if I ever introduced the concept of stacking. That is, a fleet can only be so large. Now, would even be neater is that the size of the fleet that can be together is based off of the maximum size class. Let's say for a dreadnought, that you can have a maximum of 20 ships, versus if you have just a heavy cruiser, you can have a maximum of 3, or a maximum maybe 4 or 5. So in the case of that, the stuff with the Warlord, the whole idea would be that you actually have a whole command and control thing, and so forth. So maybe that will be an optional rule that might be done in the future, but there's a lot of time between now and then. So, but now obviously, one of the things that would slow down the Juggernaut is just the BPV, because to build these ships requires a heck of a lot more BPV, a heck of a lot more economics, a heck of a lot larger of an empire to build these ships in a timely fashion. Otherwise, that you'll be building so slowly that it almost becomes unusable. Your opponents will just run you over, Because I'm assuming that each shipyard, whether it's a Juggernaut Planet Empire or Klingon or Federation or whatever, that they all the shipyards are basically the same. They have no way of producing more ships or doing, you know, you know, basically producing more ships more quickly. So now I think they become obviously it'd be kind of neat to try them in a player campaign. Obviously it would take quite a bit of work to get everything that's needed, you know, from the bases, because the base, unlike ships, I think we pointed this out, that 360-degree shield can be in any direction. Now, unlike the ships, you would assume that there would be no engines, no exhaust port, and so forth that the ships have. So it just now the question is whether it would need that big of a rotating shield. Possibly not. I'm just thinking about the Andromedans wouldn't, they would have their butt kicked from the Juggernaughts, which actually leads to an interesting question in my mind, and that is the whole idea of extragalactic empires, and that there might be a conflict between the extragalactic empires. You know, and then I was almost going to say be a proxy, but that's not really what I'm thinking about. But it's more like a game of Go, in that you try to take over this galaxy here, and then you can use, and this galaxy here, this galaxy here, you're cutting off your opponent from getting resources because because of the systems, the galaxy you've already done it. Now, here's the one thing that makes it even more interesting, in that time scale. Time scale is a huge difference, because of I know we've talked about the Andromedans that took the Andromedans to get from their home galaxy to LMC was quite a bit of time. Now, assuming that this race between these extragalactic empires is going on, it would take them longer than, if we just focused on the Milky Way or a portion of the Milky Way, because of the distances involved. So it would take a heck of a long time, instead of taking, in the case of the general war in Starfleet battles, I think if I recall correctly, it's around 20 or 30 years. Now, the same idea when it comes to extragalactic empires, in my mind, we're not talking about 20 to 30 years. We're talking about 20 to 30 centuries, or maybe even longer, because it takes so long to get from point A to point B. Even the Andromedans, who you would think would probably have the biggest leg up on things because of their knowledge of space-time, the whole idea of the displacement device and the rapid transit networks, and how to get from here to here much faster than anyone else. But still, it is what it is. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap up with that. I was hoping Gary would show up, but Gary did not, which means we might be reviewing this again with Gary at some later point in time. I still got my, all I call it is my my Juggernaut PDF. You know, it's from caps log number 1, caps log number 33, number 35, and number 40. Let me look down here. I think it's maybe 41. 41. You know, I grabbed the I bought the electronic versions of the captain's log so that I could have this, slice and dice the PDF pages and create one document, which is just the Juggernaughts, all of the ships of the Juggernaughts, from this tiny little frigate up to this massive battleship. Yeah. This ship can control a number of seeking weapons equal to half its sensor rating. Now, for those of you who know Starfleet battles, you know the reason why. And that is, these ships were not designed with seeking weapons in mind. Because the understanding is that when it comes to these seeking weapons here, is that they are ad hoc seeking weapons. They were not designed to be seeking weapons to begin with. They were designed to be shuttles going from point A to point B. And which means that the ships weren't designed to have seeking weapons to begin with. So in that case, according to the rules, the maximum number of seeking weapons it can control is equal to half the sensor rating. And that's for ships that normally don't have seeking weapons. Like an LDR ship, which has no drones, has no seeking weapons whatsoever. So they only can control half. So anyhow, I think we'll wrap it up there for this evening. So, and with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.